may pop up and
Got it. Okay.
and then do you want to let everybody in, or do you want me to? I don't know if it'll still let me do that.
Oh, yeah, are we ready? I'll admit everyone and then change that preference.
Yeah, and we could wait another minute or two, but that way people start getting in.
Okay. Well, yeah, I'll go ahead and hit admit. All right, Sean and Chuck, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Hey. Should be good, and I disabled the waiting room as well.
Oh, okay, perfect. I believe Christy said there were 20 some participants, so I'd say we give folks a few more minutes. For those of you who were already logged in, we're going to wait another minute or so and let the others who are registered get signed in. So we'll start here very shortly. I'm going to grab this real quick. I show it as asphalt. Hello, this is he.
from ODOT relax some of their licensing requirements. You can shift gears on a dump truck and pull the lever to.
Okay, sorry about that. That was, it showed up as asphalt, and I thought it might be related to this. So it looks like we have the majority of folks. We are going to get started. Welcome, everyone. My name is Heath Pickerel. I'm director of Missouri LTAP here in Rolla. We're located at Missouri University of Science and Technology. And I certainly want to thank you all for participating today, and thank our folks who helped set this up, as well as our speaker. I just wanted to quickly let everybody know about a related event being held here in Rolla. It is the Missouri Asphalt Conference that's taking place December 6th and 7th here on campus at the Havner Center. I am going to post the brochure in the chat. So if you've not seen that, certainly check it out. If you have any questions on that, you can reach out to the LTAP office. You can reach out to me directly. Dave Richardson is still involved as well. Many of you probably know Dr. Richardson here on campus from his 30 plus years involvement in that asphalt conference. And then again, I will post that brochure in the chat pod. So with that, I am going to pass this off to Sean Roast.
Thank you, Heath. Good afternoon. My name is Sean Brost, and thank you for joining us today for our presentation, our webinar presentation. It's presented by the Missouri Pavement Preservation Council. We are a group of 4 contractors, original members, from Missouri Petroleum, Microsurfacing Contractors, Corrective Asphalt Materials, and Vance Brothers. And the goal of this council is to educate and inform anyone interested in the benefits of pavement preservation. Today's presenter is Chuck Ingram. Chuck is the current president of the International Slurry Surfacing Association and has been in the slurry and microsurfacing industry for over 40 years. Located in Virginia, he has completed projects in multiple states for municipalities large and small. Chuck has a great amount of knowledge and experience, and looking forward to what he has to share with us today, and I hope you are as well. If anyone has any questions, feel free to write them in the chat box as we're going along, or just speak up if you'd like, or save them for the end, however you'd like. So with that, Chuck, I will pass it on over to you.
I will quickly add that we are recording this, so this will be available later, but just wanted to give everybody a heads up on that this session is recorded.
All right. Well, very good. Can you hear me okay now?
Yep.
Is it going well? Okay. Well, good deal. Sean, thank you for that. I appreciate it. And Caitlin, Heath, thanks for the hospitality today. Enjoy being here. And as Sean said, I'm over here in Virginia. My day job, aside from the duties with the International Slurry Surfacing Association, I have been working with a contractor, slurry and microsurfacing contractor here in Virginia, where it is currently not a microsurfacing day. You can't see out in the window, but we're right on the edge of freezing rain, and it's just about 34, 36 degrees, and I'm glad to be inside talking with y'all. So, being in person is so much different than doing this, but I kind of usually would like to get a feel for, the group. And Caitlin, I'm sorry I didn't say that I was going to do this, but I bet the only way to get a feel for what kind of a group we're talking with is to, if you've had no experience with microsurfacing or slurry seals, or some, a little bit of contact, a little bit of experience with working with either of these thin surfacing treatments, either through an inspection phase or as an agency owner. Just get in the chat and just give us an idea of just what sort of a level of experience that you've got. Sometimes that just has a way of tempering the way some of these things are presented. Some things we can skim over, or people are familiar with it, and other times we want to spend other time with some of these particulars. So if just give me an idea what kind of a level of participation that we got here. And let's see if I can open this. I don't know if I can open that chat. Oh, there you go. Very little.
Open.
Okay, here we go. I got it. Got a couple with very little to zero to minimal. Okay, very little. All right. Well, that's actually, kind of what I was hoping to see, to be honest with you, because you get people in here that, like Sean, that know a lot more about this stuff than I do. It's kind of, kind of puts me on the spot, But anyway, so now we'll go through this, and we'll talk about the importance of migrating a pavement preservation program into a current program that you have, with specific attention paid to slurry surfacing systems, particularly the micro surfacing here. I got here on the cover sheet it's a thin surface with a big impact, and you can see that it's a very adaptable type of an application that is put on pavements that are in generally very good, to good condition to start with. It's a preventive maintenance application. It's not meant to completely reprofile or add capacity strength or structural strength to a pavement. And it's just as valuable as a tool as it can be here, as you see on a rural residential area. To the picture on the right-hand side of your screen there is Interstate 66 here in Northern Virginia, right up near Dulles Airport, where that stretch of road currently carries in excess of 275,000 cars a day. So you can see we use it from anything from cul-de-sacs to very, very heavily traveled roads. But the key as we go along, you're going to understand that these thin treatments are only as good as the pavement that you put them on top of. They really, again, are just meant to preserve the investment in the roadways that you've got in place right now. So to start off just briefly, we can just give a broad brush look at what is pavement preservation as it's defined by the Pavement Preservation Expert Task Force, which has just recently changed the name, and I'm a member of that group, so I should know what the name of the group is, but it's definitely it's affiliated with FHWA. But in years past, they identified pavement preservation as being a program employing a network level long-term strategy that enhances pavement performance by using an integrated, cost-effective set of practices that extend the pavement life, improve safety, and meet the motorist expectations. So it's something, again, put it on a road that's in pretty good shape to enhance the investment that you've already got. Another way of saying it, again, another FHWA definition would be to say that preservation involves a paradigm shift away from the thinking that unfortunately still a whole lot of people have and subscribe to a worst first theory of pavement preservation. They'll look at it and say that, well, I've got roads that just absolutely need to get paved. I don't have enough money to do pavement preservation. Well, nothing could be further away from the truth. So what we're trying to do with this whole little talk today is just gain some insight on how do we get away from this worst first way of thinking and move it more towards an optimum timing type of a thing, because we'll see that the timing will have everything to do with success of some of these thin treatments. One of my favorite definitions of pavement preservation, when I first got started doing this here in Virginia back in the mid 70s, the highway maintenance engineer in VDOT, before pavement preservation or preventive maintenance or anything were buzzwords. He just said, well, he said, this kind of stuff is something you put on a road a year before you need it. And really and truly, I mean, that's just all these other definitions we looked at had a lot of words to them. But when it comes down to it, if you time this out right and put the right treatment on the right road, a year ahead of time is probably a good timeline to stick to. An effective pavement preservation program, as I started saying, it's going to address good pavement before the distresses have a chance to set in. And typically, after 4 to 7 years after a pavement is put in place, you're starting to see some of these surface distresses. And depending on where you are in the country, what type of weather you have going on, out in the Southwest where you've got sun beating on it all the time and you're just drying out and embrittling the pavement, that 4 to 7 year window can certainly change. But typically, when I deal with agencies, particularly smaller municipalities that are trying to get into something like this for the first time, they say, well, how do I know what kind of road to look at? And sight unseen, I can just encourage them to go back in your archives there and pick out the roads that you paved 6 years ago. Okay. What do they look like? Okay. If they look like they're in really good shape still, maybe look at the roads you paved 7 years ago. Let's start with that. Then let's do a windshield survey and just try to identify some kind of surface distresses that may have set in. And we can begin to address them with some of the surface preparation techniques that we'll talk about in a few minutes. But, if you apply these things at the right time, pavement can be restored to a nearly new condition. And one of the graphs that we'll see in just a second will sort of illustrate that. You can take a road that might be rating, say, a 90 on a 0 to 100 scale right now, and you put a thin treatment like a slurry seal or a microsurfacing on it, it will likely not bring it right back up to where it's a brand new condition. But it'll bring it up far enough on the curve that it will buy you the time to save that serviceable life in the pavement that you've already spent a lot of money to build. And the cumulative effect of some of these pavement preservation techniques are going to ultimately postpone the need for costly rehab or even reconstruction practices down the road. And if you price it out, there's all sorts of metrics that are done, but the life cycle costing analysis, for those that are subscribing to pavement preservation programs, will be able to share with you that their costs are well in line and kept under control over the time. Unless it's disruptive to traffic, you don't have significantly long lane closures, you don't have concrete that has time to cure, you don't have multiple layers of asphalt that might need to be compacted and open to traffic, and just different elevations of pavements, and just the whole deal with phases of different construction. This picture that I threw in here was sort of a snapshot that I took through the windshield riding with a customer that has used this photo when he goes to his county council arguing for more money for pavement preservation. This is his hero road that he paved 16, 17 years ago, and he got his 7 years life out of it. And then he applied one application of microsurfacing to it. And then, as we'll talk about the microsurfacing and life expectancies, 5, 6 years into the life of the microsurfacing, he went ahead and put another coat of it down. This is the second application of a microsurfacing to a road that's had nothing else done to it over the course of 17 years. And so he uses this picture right here to argue with his bean counters that pavement preservation is really paying off for the county. And we talk about the pavement preservation, and it's really sort of an umbrella that covers different types of maintenance. What we're going to spend most of the time on is obviously the preventive maintenance aspects of pavement preservation. Yeah. We're trying to capture these pavements while they're in still decent shape before the surface distresses have a chance to take over. But, we're all involved with budgets and decisions and everything else. So there are going to be times that, we're using these thin treatments as corrective tools. Sometimes the surface distresses are caught up. Maybe you're in year 7 or 8. You've got some surface distresses. And so what you're really doing is shortening the potential performance curve of a thin treatment by using it later in the pavement's life, because you're hoping to correct the surface distresses that may already be in place, and consequently they're just going to shadow through some of these thin treatments a little quicker than they would if you had applied the stuff to a pavement in a little bit better condition. And we also get caught in a situation where I just got this much money, I got this road, we got to do something to it. And I understand that putting a blanket on this road right now is not what it really needs, but I need to buy a little bit of time. You know, and I'm really cautious about agencies that are stuck having to react this way to their budgets. But as long as everybody's on page with understanding what the intent is of putting a thin surface treatment like a microsurfacing down on top of a pavement that's several years old with multiple distresses in it, as long as we understand that we're just trying to get over the hump until we can afford to do the proper, perhaps more expensive fixes, you know, we'll be okay. You know, what we refer to a lot of times the microsurfacing as one of the top of the curve treatments. Now look at the red line. We've all seen pavement condition curves over time that tell different stories, but the pavement condition curve here, obviously your pavement's going to start off in year 1 in excellent condition. And, you know, arguably, you know, this chart goes out to where the pavement condition at year 13 or 14 has completely reached the end of its life. Now, obviously, I've gotten some pushback from friends in the hot mix asphalt industry over that slide, you know, arguing that their pavements are going to last longer than that. But then I've also had discussions with the various DOT people who are seeing pavement life's not reaching this level. So we'll just pick this happy medium. In the first 75% of this particular pavement's life, or sometime in about year 10, you're going to lose about 40% of the quality that was built into that pavement. As you can see, that curve is just sort of gradually depleting right now. But now, you know, in the first 10 years, you've lost 40% of your life, but all you do is go forward another 2 or 3 years and you've lost yet another 40%. So once that curve starts dropping off, you know, we really start losing the value of the pavement that we have. Something's got to get done to it closer up to the top of the curve that's going to extend that serviceable life. Now, whether these numbers are accurate any longer or not, but just proportionately, you know, if you're up in that top part of that curve, you know, those subsequent lines that we have on the squiggly lines on top are intervals of applications of a microsurfacing treatment on a road that was in good shape to start with. And you can see that we're still above that threshold as we stretch out into year 25 potentially by repeated applications of a thin surfacing material like a microsurfacing. Now, you know, back to, you know, the previous slide when we talked about reactive maintenance, you know, yeah, we've waited now, as you can see, we're down that curve. We're down into year 11 or 12. We've got some surface distresses in there. Not only are you going to pay more for a treatment applied there, you know, just based on the life you're going to get out of it, because, you know, you're going to get a quick spike in the condition of the pavement by putting anything down on it if it's in bad shape. I always say that, you know, the worst that we'll get out of a microsurfacing is something that will buy time, but that time quickly goes by. So you can see it doesn't take very long for that pavement to start shadowing or mirroring the pavement condition curve for an untreated pavement. So, you know, the truth in this story here is that the earlier in the cycle you capture a pavement, the better off you're going to be financially down the road. Putting it in terms of the thin treatments that we're talking about here, up on the top of the curve, like I said, you've got your fog seals and slurry seals and microsurfacing. You know, pavements have got to be in pretty good shape for those to be effective. And we're still above the 75% of the life curve here. Arguably, some forms of chip seal applications can be still effective a little bit later down that curve. But once you start getting much below the fair category, you know, some of these thin preservation treatments really are not going to be the answer for getting your system back up into the condition that you want to keep it in. This is one of the better pictures and stories that clearly tell just what I've been talking about here. Got this slide from a friend of mine up in Connecticut. There is a road up between Fairfield, I'm not sure what the neighboring town is. The two towns co-own this road. Fairfield owns to the right of the double yellow line. The other town owns to the left. In 2004, they did a co-sharing, cost-sharing job where they had someone come in and mill and pave the pavement. And over the course of the year, the town on the left just let Mother Nature take its course, whereas the fellow on the agency on the right-hand side had already adapted a fairly aggressive pavement preservation program citywide. And in year 6, after the application of the new asphalt, they began a crack sealing and microsurfacing program. So that was in 2010. And fast forward here, you're 6 years later, and you can graphically see the value of what a periodic combination of pavement preservation techniques can have over the old worst first philosophy that the town on the left has to see. So we have a pretty graphic example of what the value of pavement preservation can be on the similar pavements. Okay, those not really familiar with what the microsurfacing is, and we'll see pictures in just a second. It's a mixture of a finely, continuously graded aggregate, a little bit of mineral filler. We'll get into the recipe, what makes up the mixture, some polymer modified asphalt emulsion and water that are all in this recipe, that properly proportioned and mixed as a thin surface treatment. And we'll see the application equipment and how it works. But basically, it's just a thin, say, 1/4 of an inch or so, 3/16 of an inch thick application to a road in pretty good shape. But when it's applied, the cured microsurfacing is going to have a homogeneous appearance, pardon me, and fill cracks. Be very careful with that terminology there about filling cracks with microsurfacing. That's why I kind of capitalized it there. While it is a liquid material, and while you do have some fine material, fine aggregate in it, it will seep into some of the wider cracks. But the microsurfacing itself is not designed to seal cracks for a long-term basis. It's not your end-all be-all treatment for cracking. I always say that if you've got a cracking problem, treat it with the cracking materials that you've already utilized, and we'll see how well they work with the microsurfacing in combination here in just a little bit. But if you use the material properly, it's going to adhere firmly to the surface and provide a weatherproof high friction seal. So that's one of the other values that we build into the microsurfacing application is a skid resistant surface, and it's come in very handy on days like here today with us at home. Depending on the size of the job, now we'll look at some different types of application equipment. But for those of you that have had no experience or very, very little, you can kind of get a feel from these pictures. Just, you know, we're dealing with a seal coat, a heavy duty seal coat at that. But we're talking about an application on a road that's in pretty good shape, just to give it the surface a restored appearance and service, as well as hopefully a uniform appearance that takes on the appearance of a newly applied road. Now these truck mount pavers, now these trucks are typically used on some smaller work. You can see here we're working in residential areas, cul-de-sacs, parking lots, you know, places where where there's a lot of low volume traffic, for instance. These truck mount units are portable in comparison to some of the other equipment that we're going to see in just a minute, but they're very well suited for these smaller jobs. And these truck mount pavers have got some advantages to them as opposed to some of the bigger equipment we'll see. It's flexible, it's more mobile. You're operating with several less people on your crew. You know, a truck mounted crew like that, including your traffic control aspect of it, is maybe a crew of 12 to 15 people. The machine is mounted on a truck chassis. It's quick travel speeds between jobs, and it's very maneuverable. You can sort of see the smaller axle spacings, you know, allow you to get into cul-de-sacs and smaller areas. You know, the disadvantage of these truck mount units, as we'll see with the other equipment in a minute, about every 1,500 feet, one of these trucks is going to run out of materials, and they're going to have to stop, and you're going to have to build a construction joint about every 12 to 1,500 feet. And it's an expensive piece of equipment in that, you know, you're using it about 3/4 of the time is spent on the road back and forth to the staging area, getting new materials put on it, and very little time actually on the job. The operator stands on the back, and we'll see all this in a sec. The operator is working the recipe from the back of the truck and does not have control of the forward speed of the paver. And then sometimes that maneuverability can be a bit of a disadvantage in that you know, you are limited to, you know, the smaller locations perhaps that where it does its best work. Now we'll refer to this bigger equipment, the same design basically, but just with a higher throughput and a higher production capability. You know, just what the name here implies, you know, continuously running, where the other trucks are going to run out at about 12 to 1,500 feet. This machine here, if you have enough of those supply unit trucks in front of it, such as the picture here on the right, you could theoretically pave for great long stretches of road before you have to stop and reload any of the equipment. So these continuous run machines are very well suited for interstate pavements like these here, long stretches of primary or arterial roads. Higher production stuff, they get in, they get out quicker, and just better performing for both the contractor and the agency. We're in and out, you know, a whole lot quicker. You know, a little schematic of, we're paving from left, or we're paving from right to left here. So, but the truck is on your left, and on board those trucks, you've got all your crushed aggregate, your cement, which we'll use as an additive to help with the recipe blending together. You know, you've got the polymer modified emulsion. All three of these components are met together in a mixing chamber on the back end of this truck, and mixed depending on the piece of equipment you have. You know, it's going to take 15-30 seconds or so for the materials to mix inside the paver before they're dumped into a spreader box that's in contact with the road, and we're paving from right to left here. Right out of the back of that machine, that material, as you saw in the first couple of pictures, is a little bit brown in color because we do have some water that's added to this mix. As time goes by, in about the first 2 minutes of the time that the material's on the pavement, it's going to start breaking or starting to cure. And when the water starts leaving that mix is when the mixture is going to start turning a darker color. And within about an hour's time, now you've got a brand new installation of a texturized black pavement that should be ready for slow rolling traffic within about an hour's time. Now, the microsurfacing that we're talking specifically about is designed to hold that slow rolling traffic in an hour's time. Sometimes we'll deal with an unmodified slurry seal treatment that depends a little bit more on the ambient conditions. You know, the surface of the pavement has a little heat in it, certainly. The lower humidity, maybe some sunshine, all those things help the microsurfacing for sure. But really, the slurry seals are more environmentally dependent on their drying and traffic ready time. That can vary from 2 to say 3 or 4 hours. But the microsurfacing that we're talking about is usually a pretty quick turnaround. That's why it's really valuable in some of the high density areas, you know, long roadways that maybe restaurants or motels or business parks or such as that, where you need a little bit of access sooner than you might with some other treatments. Yeah, I kind of jumped ahead and explained about where all the materials are, but there's a little video of how the machines work in tandem with mixing and applying the materials. Now, this is one of the continuous run operations that we just looked at. You can see the truck in front here has got his aggregate on it. You got that long cylindrical tank on the passenger side that will carry the emulsion that's pumped onto the paver, and there's a very similar tank on the other side that will transfer what little bit of water needs to be applied to this recipe, if you will. And if I can get my cursor straight, we'll turn this video on, and I got a couple of other comments while we're going. Oops. There we go. You see all these materials are being transferred from the front truck to the back of unit there, the paver. The fella sitting down there is making sure he's driving in a straight line. The fellow up top is monitoring the feed of the aggregate as it comes up into a hopper bin. He's checking his gauge settings and the connections with his liquids there. You can see a little picture on top there. We got the stone flying into the hopper. And it's all being moved to a mixing chamber on the back end. I'm going to try to halt this in just a second. Where you got an operator back there that is monitoring what's going. Shoot. I apologize. Okay, the material's been coming through the machine. All the materials are metered and factored in. They're spit into that spreader box on the back. The operator is checking right now. I'll show you what he's looking at. The computer screen on the back there that's monitoring all the throughput, all the materials. You can adjust slightly the crown or the thickness of the application on the back, which is what that one operator is doing there. But you see it's just a thin treatment applied to a road. It's in pretty good shape with the materials that are metered and calibrated on that machine ahead of time to make sure you're getting the proportion of everything. But a steadily moving operation down through there, a little bit better than a walk pace through there. Just material as you go. Now you see he's got another nurse train and hook up to the paver when this load runs out, and it's typically about every, again, 1,500 feet or so. But the onboard storage, where you saw that stone belt up on top where the cement mineral filler bags are, you know, there's enough onboard storage on that paver that he can keep going for maybe a half a city block while the other truck is getting positioned and coming into place. And this is what that operator was looking at. There's a screen that monitors everything that he's got going on. I don't have a cursor here to really point out what's going in there, but you can pay attention to the emulsion throughput, the water throughput, how much additive, if any, is being added. The machine is preset. If you go down about 3/4 of the way down on the bottom left there, the set point, the online, and the average, is, where you have told the machine what your asphalt content should be, what your percentage of mineral filler should be, how much water per weight of aggregate that you're using. And all that is being monitored constantly. And this is what's going on that the operators keep an eye on, just to be sure that that everything is operating as proper. You can see here also that the application rate is programmed in. Your specifications are going to dictate just how thick this material should be placed. It's going to be an application rate that's going to have a range between, say for this material here, they're working somewhere probably between 15 and 18 or 19 pounds per square yard. And that will be calculated as you're going through. This machine also will have a printer for those of you interested in keeping track on a regular basis through the course of a day, what my project is doing, how much materials am I using. The operator can give you a printout from the back of that machine at any point during the course of a day to keep you apprised on just what's going on. It's a great tool for the inspectors, particularly at the end of the day, to keep up with daily production units. So these continuous pavers are widely used. Again, not just because they're big doesn't mean you can't do some smaller work with them, but they're just a little bit too cumbersome for doing a lot of cul-de-sac type of work. But obviously an advantage with the nurse trucks and the onboard storage of the paver, you're not going to have as frequent of transverse joints as you do with the truck mounted units. That operator on the back of the truck has full control of the forward speed. Obviously, you can cover a little more ground in the course of a day. The first guy that we talked about, the line driver, there are steering wheels stations at both sides of the machine, so he can pave with and against traffic if need be. The trucks, you've got the availability of trucks to keep that operation going. And when we talk about the calibration, which is really critical to make sure that recipe that I keep referring to is consistent, if you've got a job where you've got those small truck mount units on it, you've got that many trucks that have to be calibrated on a regular basis just to be sure that the throughput of all those raw materials is consistent. With a continuous run paver, you just calibrate the thing one time and you're set to go. Obviously, if your paver goes down, you're done. You don't have any other mixing capabilities. So that's one big disadvantage. If something happens with one of these pavers, you're kind of dead in the water for a while. They're not as maneuverable moving from job to job as some of the truck mount units are. So you need to load it on a low boy and haul it from one place to another. It does carry more people on that crew, where we were before 12 to 15 people. We may be upwards of 20, 22 people that's needed to keep this bigger operation going. And also the flexibility on a truck mounted unit, where you could actually be paving on two different roads at the same time with the truck mounted units. You got one paver and it's tied to your one job. We'll talk about the different sizes of aggregate. Okay, now we're still talking about one application of material, but how smooth or how coarse do you really need your pavements? What type of pavement do you have? What type of speed do you have? What's the volume of traffic on a daily basis? Some of these questions we'll get into in just a second will kind of dictate how smooth or how coarse of a pavement that you want to use. Now, these are the ISSA gradations of type 1 or type 2 or type 3 aggregate. And those of you that understand sieve analysis, can read here and tell that type 1 aggregate is a very much smaller aggregate. It's a smoother stone. The type 2 is an aggregate size that we're going to use generally, your subdivision work. We can even do some arterial type work with the middle grade aggregate. But for your maximum skid resistant situations out on an interstate pavement, for instance, you may want to lean toward the type 3 aggregate. We'll put this in pictures in just a second. But again, going back to the type 1, you can see that 100% of that stone is going to pass the first 2 sieves, whereas you've got a smaller amount of material actually getting passed through on the coarser sieves. So it's just a decision that you need to make in-house with what type of application and what type of surface do you want afterwards. Now, the one thing that you pay attention to with each one of these aggregates too is the thickness of the application. The thinner application is going to be probably here with your type 1 rock that may range from 12 to 15 pounds of material per square yard, where you go to the other side of the chart there with a type 3 and you can be upwards of 24 to 26 pounds per square yard. Not only does that translate into more skid resistance, but it's also it's a thicker application with the larger the aggregate that you use. And just graphically, this is basically what we're looking at. Here in Virginia, we do a lot of work with each one of these 3 aggregate sizes. The type 1, as you can see, it still does have some texture to it. But really, when you put that down, get a little bit of traffic on it, and let it start rolling it out itself, that type 1 aggregate is a very, very smooth surface. Now we'll use that in residential work almost exclusively. It's the slower volume, the lower the slower speeds, and the lower volume of traffic. You don't necessarily need a pavement that's going to offer maximum skid resistance or be that thick. We've got some good life expectancies out of the type 1 aggregates on lower volume roads. Type 2 is the workhorse. That's sort of the one that we'll go to with your bigger neighborhoods or your arterial roads even sometimes. And we'll see some interesting combinations of these gradations later on before we finish up. Again, it all goes back to your desired life expectancy, your desired surface texture, and your contractor can work with you and kind of custom make you a program based on the availability of his aggregates.
Hey, Chuck, we've got a question in the chat real fast. Have you got a second?
I didn't open that up.
Do you ever use milling in the micro treatments?
Yeah, we have in years. Yes, we do. In years past, particularly before people got very comfortable with micro surfacing being used as a skid resistant application, they had contractors actually do some micro milling to ensure that the pavement was no longer slick, but now we're going to put micro surfacing on top of milling. It really didn't make a whole hell of a lot of sense then, and depending on the situation, it's not necessary. The micro milled surfaces certainly create a uniform surface that will accept the micro surfacing and help it adhere to the pavement, no doubt about it. But it's not necessary to do any micro milling or regular milling prior to, unless you've got some the pavement is really out of shape, out of contour. But again, what type of condition is the pavement? What's causing the deformities on the surface? If you've got to do some milling to reestablish a grade and slope, so is it possible to use? But yeah, sure. But honestly, I think depending on the situation, it would be a little bit overkill. Not 100% necessary. Does that kind of answer it? But given that it is a semi-liquid material, and we do have the emulsion itself is going to have a certain percentage of water in it, and then for the final mixture on the back of those pavers, we're adding another, depending on the moisture content of the rock, we might be adding another 10% water to the mix by way of the aggregate. So there's plenty of water, plenty of fluid in this material. So it's very susceptible to damage on cold days. You can't be placing microsurfacing on pavements if the surface and air temperatures below 50 degrees and falling. You do have to have and maintain some sort of weather conditions for this material to break and cure and set and be traffic ready in a reasonable amount of time. But you can place these mixes. Now, these are all based on ISSA guideline specifications. Mixes can be placed if the surface and air temperatures are above 45 degrees and rising. So, that's just leaning toward the rationale that okay, your day is going to get better as it goes on. We're stuck in a pattern here in our part of the world right now is we're not going to have temperatures above 50 degrees for the next 10 days. So if we don't have anything above 50 degrees, coupled with the fact that we do have freezing temperatures, the last bullet here, that's the big one. I don't necessarily get into splitting hairs between 45 and 48 and 48 and 52 degrees, but where the big problem can come in is if you do get freezing temperatures within 24 hours. Even though this stuff is traffic ready after a period of a time, a year, an hour or so, there's a fine amount, still a little bit of moisture left in that material, and it will be very susceptible to freezing. Now, those of you that Sean, I think, probably has seen it, but if you've ever seen a microsurfacing freeze before it's 100% cured, it's like peanut brittle coming off the road. There's just a little bit amount of moisture in there with a super freeze within 24 hours could really, really be problematic. So, the warmer the better, but you can operate at marginal temperatures right around the 50 degree level. Some benefits of micro is, we don't want to dwell much on the cost, although it does cost a fourth to a third of the cost of your regular hot mix asphalt pavement. But we still don't want to say that we can replace asphalt pavement. That's not the intent at all. We're going to preach, right treatment on the right road at the right time. And, it's just, it's a cheaper application. But are you getting your money worth out of it by putting it on roads that are deteriorated past the point of really paying you back? So just don't dwell too much on the cost, but it is an important factor, particularly those that are just getting into the preservation industry or preservation business and understand the value of a budget and understand the fact that worst first isn't the way that they really want to address their system. That the money can go a long way if it's on the right pavement. Okay. And back, kind of answering our own question from a minute ago, milling's not required. It's a thin treatment that typically people will mill sometimes at the gutter pan to match elevations with thin lift asphalt pavements. This material again is a 3/16 to a quarter of an inch thick. It can be feathered down to nothing basically at the edge of the gutter pan, so it's not going to affect your drainage. Your utility casting adjustment is typically not needed. You don't have to raise manholes like you do with other treatments. When we go over a drop inlet, for instance, along curb line, we'll typically just protect it with a roofing paper or something like that. So you don't have to change any elevation on any of your utilities. Similarly on bridges, we have opportunities here. There's a lot of bridges, particularly in Southeast Virginia, over waterways, that are pretty sensitive to this, but you don't lose any reveal at your scuppers, for your drainage. You're not losing any appreciable height or weight on a bridge deck. You're not losing any overhead clearance with it. So a thin, serviceable treatment is what we're dealing with. And again, your rapid cure times, we're professing to be able to get in there and get some traffic ready in about an hour or so. Properly maintained mix design, you're going to have an attractive finish. Depending on the texture on the roadway, we're going to have hopefully a hot mix asphalt appearance when we're done and out of there. but yet we can offer a high friction surface that's going to retain skid numbers for the life of the surface. I don't know that how many of you are familiar with the skid numbers and what is the safety level and what type of a safety number or a skid number that will require some attention. But you know, we just had some microsurfacing not far from here that was 8 years old, that they were doing some forensic work on it and got some inside information from the guy that did the testing, and we were still getting skid numbers in the low 50s with an 8.5-year-old microsurfacing application. You know, with the coarser aggregates, sometimes I've seen numbers come in as high as 62 and 63 with your type 3 microsurfacing application on higher speed arterials like this one here in the picture. You know, we get calls a lot, you know, there's I need to get some skid numbers up, you know, and how are we going to address that? Well, you know, the high friction surface treatments out there are good products. They're offering a skid number even a little bit higher than that. But now when we start talking about budgets, you know, some of that material is going for upwards of 20, 25 or more dollars per square yard in our region, where for, you know, a $3.50 per square yard cost for microsurfacing, offering a skid number in the low 60s, it's a pretty strong argument to make, you know, depending on what type of pavement that you're dealing with. So it's a very, very beneficial treatment if you only want to talk about skid resistance. Okay, unlike some surface treatments, there's very minimal surface loss of aggregate. It is 100% recyclable. Put down on the right pavement, you know, we're going to expect a serviceable life of 5 to 7 years. And you do have the capability with microsurfacing to place it in multiple lifts, whereas some other treatments, such as the slurry, for instance, you know, we'll talk about that as being a monolayer treatment. We can place microsurfacing in multiple layers and do some other correction activities that we'll see in just a little bit. But you can do some minor leveling with the micro that you cannot do with some other treatments. Okay, I do see a question here from Steve. You know, what do you look for to permit traffic on the slurry pavement or microsurfacing pavement, I guess? Well, Steve, for one thing, you know, like you see here on the left-hand side of the road, your pavement is, you know, when you're directly behind that paver, we've still got all that water in the mix. You can see the brown color against the lane. It's already open to traffic. It's already broken and cured. It's been under traffic for at least that day since they're working the second day on that other lane. You'll be able to walk across the material, and even though there's times that you can walk across a microsurfacing that's just about cured, and on the outside of your footprint, you may see a little bit of moisture squeezing out. Now, if you're squeezing a little bit of moisture out of that material, just reach down and touch on it and just see, is that clear water? Are you expelling clear water when you walk across there? Or if there'll be instances where traffic will sneak behind a traffic cone. You know, did that guy really tear the surface up? Was that just, did he squeeze out any moisture on it? Did he damage it at all? You know, it's kind of a thing, Steve, you got to look at and be around a little bit to determine exactly when it's ready without waiting too long. I mean, you can't wait too long, but if you want to get it open as soon as possible, there's some ways that you can just do it. Just walk on it yourself. We've got traffic guys that are up and down the road all the time picking up cones. He'll swerve into the lane by a foot or so just to see what sort of traffic mark that he might be leaving. If he's not leaving any traffic marks when he pulls in there, he's probably pretty rest assured that he can open that thing up to traffic. You know, here in Virginia, they did have one test years ago. I don't know that they do it anymore, to check the curing level of a microsurfacing. They called it, you know, it was a genius test that they named the white paper towel test. So guess what they used, what apparatus they used for that test? Okay. They would just take a sample of microsurfacing and simply pat a white paper towel on it and lift it up. And if you didn't have any emulsion or asphalt residue when you lifted it up, you're probably ready for traffic. So it's a lot of words to answer your question, Steve. But really, if you can walk on it, or if you can touch of it and not pick up any raw asphalt, you're pretty close to cured and about ready for traffic. Okay, what is the right road? You know, again, we talked about it. Structurally sound pavement is very important. It's got to be structurally sound. We got a little thin treatment that we're putting on that road. We're not going to build any strength into it. So, you know, we've got a pavement that's in good shape, 4 to 7 years old. You might have some minor cracking in it. Seal those cracks. Local failures, if you got any, repair your potholes or utility cuts, and just restore that pavement back to near structurally sound condition, and you're ready to go. You know, some ideas that you would use to consider whether it is a candidate for one of these thin treatments, you know, help you decide on what material to use, what gradation of stone to use. Are you dealing with an interstate, a primary, or a secondary road? What's the speed? What's the volume of traffic? Are there other distresses, including cracking in the surface? What's causing the rutting? You know, is it an environmental rut? Is it a structural problems causing the rutting? Is it a what we'll call a consolidation rut? We'll see pictures of this stuff in just a second. Utility cuts. Is the pavement slick or flushed? Do you have vegetation in the road, along the road? Do you have grass growing through the crack interface between your curb and gutter and the pavement? What type of pavement markings do you have on there? And what kind of drainage issues do you have? You know, there's some problems that are brought about by poor drainage. You know, determine what kind of road you got here. You know, am I obviously dealing with something that's going to swallow a pickup truck in it? You know, we have the bottom left is a neighborhood street that, you know, they couldn't determine whether or not they wanted to patch it. So the highway department guy actually did that, took a picture of it and sent it to his boss and says, this is where we're supposed to be patching today. But localized failures like that are easily repaired. You can see the rest of the pavement is in pretty good shape. So, you know, that was a pretty good candidate with just some local failures on it. And these were some actual candidates with no prep work in the plan that were on slurry seal and a couple of microsurfacing projects that I was involved in. These are some agencies that unbelievably had used microsurfacing in the past and had tried to slip these jobs, these pavement locations in on the contract. And it just, you know, there was no prep work plan. Let's just put this micro out here and just see how it's going to do. Well, you know, thankfully we able to get these types of sections deleted. There's just more than isolated problems here to deal with. They got many more distresses than this stuff can deal with. Whereas then you got some other people that really kind of get it. You know, you got the top left picture there. They had done a little bit of patching ahead of time, but the road was in pretty good shape to start with. Where the start point was just a continuation of a microsurfacing job that was completed a year in advance. And so that pavement had been maintained regularly, and they were able to identify it as a pretty good candidate. Neighborhood street in the bottom left had a little soft spot in it. You know, they created a situation where they cut that out and patch it. And now you've got a pavement that's wholly in good condition. On the right-hand side was a section of road. You might have some hairline cracking that's not structural in nature. And this particular job was actually just patched out with, they'll call it a skin patch with a tar and chip type of a patch that's just meant to mask the surface fine hairline cracking, and structurally sound otherwise, but they were just ready to go. Okay, having trouble advancing here, but you know, we talk about, you know, looking up that curve. Okay, how old after the road is is paved? When's a good time for preservation treatment? Yeah, we talk about 4 to 7 years. Well, we had a little chat one morning. We were doing a meeting with some DOT people, and this one fellow took a look at that slide that I put up there, about 4 to 7 years old, and he said, "Well, hey, I've got a 7-year-old pavement. That can we go get in a truck and take a look at it when we're done here?" He said, "I really like the sounds of this stuff," and he said, "If this stuff works on a 7-year-old road, I'm all in." Well, this was his 7-year-old road. Now, no telling what stresses were accelerated here, but it was a pavement that he claimed was milled and replaced. I don't know if there was some bad asphalt at the plant to start with. It's not too far from where I'm sitting right now, so environmentally, it's not dramatic change in the weather that would cause a thing to accelerate and deteriorate that badly in 7 years. But the point is, just be very careful. You know, like I said, if I recommend going back on a pavement that's 4 to 7 years old and start your preservation candidate list there. Please take the time to do a windshield survey. That pavement that's 7 years old might look like this. It might look, like it's been placed, 2 summers ago. So, the point of putting eyes on pavements, I had one fellow that was told that he could only develop his entire paving program. $20 million worth of work had to be developed by sitting at a computer screen and spitting out pavement conditions and putting those roads on his paving list. He was told that he didn't have time to evaluate pavements in the field, and it was just the most absurd waste of money that I'd ever been associated with, in my opinion. But just the importance of putting eyes on it and seeing what you're dealing with. Now, this was a job that was done. You can tell it's kind of marshy land. It's on the eastern shore of Maryland, actually, not far, about 4 or 5 hours from here. But they've got their water table is real close to the surface. Truth be known, this agency was not. Half of the people in the office weren't big microsurfacing fans. I was told after the fact that they were looking for sections of road that were not good candidates on purpose to try to prove a point that microsurfacing was not a valuable tool for them. So not only did they just pick this road and put this one patch down, where I was standing taking this picture was on the joint of brand new asphalt pavement that they were putting down. So they had milled out and paved a section, and then we're just going to put microsurfacing on this end of the road to do sort of an acid test and say, this is what I told you. I was shared some information by people who probably shouldn't have, but you look at that and you say, boy, what a waste of time, what a waste of money. No chance for microsurfacing to survive that with no crack repair, no extensive patching. Well, I went back 6 months later after the winter and took a look at the microsurfacing job. It's the same location. If you see on the left-hand side, there's a little crab in front of that seafood shack. And so here's that same piece of road 6 months later. And it started making believers out of the fellows over there. And we've gained a good bit of work out of that part of the world as a result of some of the jobs that were designed and now are outperforming what they thought. Rut filling with microsurfacing is something that's unique to microsurfacing versus a slurry seal or a chip seal, say. But yes, it can level ruts, but determine what's causing that rut. If you've got cracks in the wheel path, it's probably an indication of a base or possibly a subsurface problem going on. Again, we're not building anything that's going to strengthen the road. On the right-hand side there was a job that was done in North Carolina on the interstate where they had done a 2-inch mill and fill, and immediately the pavement started rutting. Going back and looking, they found that they never got the densities that they were looking for. It was a pavement surface that was, I think, upwards of 30% wrap material. So they never got the density or the strength that they were looking for. And if you look close at that picture, the rutted section is the top overlay. The there is an interface between that and an intermediate asphalt lift, and that interface is not deformed. So they determined that their distresses were only in the surface, that the pavement itself was structurally strong. So they designed a microsurfacing and overlay, microsurfacing, rut filling and microsurfacing overlay project to be done on that piece of road. I think we got a picture of that in a minute. But it was determined it was a consolidation type or a non-structurally related rut that the microsurfacing should be able to take care of. And this was on that section of road there, where, you know, we had some pavement ruts that had actually rutted almost through that 2-inch lift that they put down. So we were doing some 1 to 1.5 inch rut filling with the microsurfacing. And you can see we have a different type of spreader box here that's designed specifically for rut filling. We're depositing the rut material in the deeper part of the rut and feathering it out on the edge. So we're just trying to re-level that road once we've determined that that it's structurally sound pavement. And then they're just checking for level behind the machine. You want to be sure that you're at least flush and you can actually overcrown that rut just a little bit to allow for traffic to compact it and level it. And then we come back and put another layer of microsurfacing over the full width of the pavement, extending the serviceable life of that thing by, I think that pavement there was in place for 10 years. Again, being careful with rutted materials, rutted sections of road. Slurry seal is not designed to do the leveling that the microsurfacing can. And with the microsurfacing, we have the chemistry in there that makes it dry that much quicker. We have the ability to, you know, the material will dry before the aggregate has a chance to settle out to the bottom of the rut. It sets up in a firmer fashion that the traffic won't beat the aggregate to the bottom of the rut like it will on some other mixes. There was a job here on the left that was designed to be a slurry seal application. And throughout the pavement section, there were ruts in excess of 1/2 inch deep. And when I argued the fact that they were putting the wrong material on the road, they said, well, we're too far along in the design phase. We're just going to put the slurry down and let's see what happens. Well, the picture on the left is what happened. They put a slurry down on a road that had 1/2 inch deep ruts throughout. The pavement flushed. They had skid numbers in the low teens, which is far below the threshold of safety. And so we ended up bargaining with them and doing a cost sharing thing. And on that same road on the right-hand side, put 1 layer of microsurfacing down, and you can see the surface texture was dramatically improved. And it all goes back to use the right treatment on the right road. So, you know, this was a leveling spot that needed to be addressed with another material other than what was originally designed. Slick or flushed bleeding surfaces typically happens, at least in this part of the world, with some chip seal applications that may have just flushed due to improper proportioning of rock and emulsion being placed on the surface. Sometimes the pavements are rutted, and the chip seals are asked to do more than they're capable of, and they're going to flush and the rock be pounded to the bottom of the rut and going to create those slick spots. You know, the picture on the right is not a wet pavement. You know, that's actually a flushed surface of a chip seal road that had gotten slick all the way across. And the county really wanted to try to make that thing a little safer, and a microsurfacing was designed to be put on top of that. Now, what you got to be careful of, if I can get to the next slide here. See, that was the road here that was so shiny from one side to the other. And, you know, 6 or 8 months after the microsurfacing was down, you've still got a surface that that's exhibiting some nice skid resistance. Now, there's a couple things that can be done differently there with regard to utilizing the microsurfacing mixtures to fix a problem. The coarser the aggregate that we have, for instance, the type 3 aggregate that was used here, does not require quite as much liquid asphalt to be placed into the recipe, if you will. You've got a lot more surface, a lot less surface area of rock the bigger you go, so you don't need to coat it all that much. Couple that with the fact that you already had a substantial amount of asphalt in the pavement underneath of it, or it wouldn't have flushed anyway. So we could design a mixed design here that utilizes a little bit less raw asphalt going into the microsurfacing. We can use this surface as perhaps a sponge, you know, to absorb some of the excess oils that were on the pavement to start with. And you know, you can get away with it on a lot of projects similar to that. But it's in your best interest, though, to number one, you know, if you can do these repairs in the spring or the fall, you'll run less risk of mirroring through and shadowing through some excess asphalt from the previous surface. But always, and I would recommend to you to always consult with your ISSA contractor before addressing it on your own, before writing a spec and saying, here's what we're going to do. Get some feedback from your contractors and see if they think it's a doable task. There's been times when we've had to walk away from it. They're just too flush. The pavements are too distressed. But certainly the microsurfacing can be a good tool to use for retexturing the road if need be. Vegetation removal, you know, just the bad part about this picture was it was taken a month after the slurry seal was placed. Wrong choice of roads again. You know, we practically had to mow the road before it was sealed. There's probably not enough herbicide in there to take care of this area where the project went on. But again, just goes back to right treatment on the right road. Beyond the fact that there was vegetation crawling across the entire surface, you know, you had failures, you had soft pavement here in the middle of the road that never got addressed either. So, you know, the stuff isn't miracle material. Just be very reasonable where it's used, and I think you'll gain some real serious good benefit out of it. We learned lessons as time went on that some of these pavement markings they're not very friendly to these thin treatments like slurry seal or in particular microsurfacing to bond to. There are places, and again, there's another road in Maryland, for instance, where and I'm not sure if you guys do, but they retrace their roads every year. And they're going to retrace it with latex paint with a lot of glass reflective media in it. So think about it now. Okay, so you're going to apply the paint to a road and you're going to restripe it every year. And we're looking for a pavement that might be 6, 7, 8 years old before your microsurfacing contractor's called in there. You might have 6 or 7 layers of paint that are very slick. And with that glass media in there, it takes on the characteristics of a tape marking or a thermoplastic marking. And there's just not enough surface tension there to want the microsurfacing to bond to it. So it was realized after learning lessons like this that now this is an older picture, and I've kept it for a reason, because it was years ago before we realized that, hey, why don't we just eradicate this stuff, grind the paint markings off, get back to a bare pavement, and we're going to have an opportunity to, you know, you can restripe the pattern differently if you want to. You can retrace what you had out there, duplicate what you had out there. But, you know, which is what they did here. But unfortunately, the microsurfacing didn't stick to the original paint. So just be very mindful of what type of pavement markings that you have on a pavement before deciding which treatment or which prep treatment you're going to use prior to a microsurfacing. Again, just typically the problem areas for adhesion to microsurfacing are going to be your thermoplastic markings, your tape markings, you know, your railroad symbols, your bicycle symbols, those kind of things, crosswalks. Be careful with that. That's one extra pay item that you're going to have to probably think about utilizing before a successful micro job. Drainage and subsurface water issues. You know, there's not much out there that's going to stick to pavement that's got standing water on them. This job here, right here on the left, you know, the guy tried to get us to repair the road 2 or 3 years after the microsurfacing was placed, and just said, unless you correct the problem, we're not going to be able to ensure any level of success for you. So that went on. We do other work for that agency in other parts of his county. And we talked about a year later, and he said, hey, we went back in and patched that place. So you don't need to go back and fix it. I wasn't intending to go back and fix it anyway, but I asked him, I said, did you fix the puddle? Did you get the drainage under control before you patched it? And he goes, no, we just cut it out and put some more asphalt in it. Well, he's setting himself up for the same situation. So water is the culprit that's going to be the baseline to many defects out there. So please try to get water away from surfaces as best you can, particularly when dealing with thin surface treatments. What we do run into and have in certain situations, again, some of those swampy areas, the marshy areas, when we've got water that's just trapped under the pavement. Now, you might have stripping going on due to some poor edgeline drainage or some subsurface moisture. Those pavements that, while they look really good on top, there could be something going on underneath of it that just hadn't manifested itself yet. So what unfortunately can happen, if you've ever been out on a microsurfacing job, those of you that have been out there, and you've had the occurrence of some local delaminations, reach down there and just pick up a slab of that microsurfacing. And if what you pull up looks like that on the bottom, you're pulling some of the asphalt road with it. Your microsurfacing is stuck to the road. Your road is just actively stripping over years. And what the microsurfacing has done, unfortunately, is accelerated what was already going on. And being that it was the last thing placed on the pavement, it just speaks to the sealing capabilities of the material. It wasn't allowing that material to take on its evaporative drying and let that moisture work its way and wick its way out of the surface. You've sealed it in there. So not necessarily the fault of the microsurfacing, but it just goes back to right treatment, right road. If you've got some drainage issues that you're aware of, this could be the culmination of a decision that was made to place material in the wrong road. Unfortunately, we don't see this all that often, but when it does happen, people have sometimes hard time grasping the fact that they had a problem going on with their road that just now manifested itself. So, but if you get a sheeting event with some microsurfacing, take a look at the bottom side of that little slab that you pick up. And if it's looking like this, that's definitely don't fault your contractor too bad. We're just going to try to wrap up as quickly as I can, or we're going to get getting close on time. But there's possibilities, depending on the surface distresses that you've got, combining some of these treatments with these preservation or preparatory treatments with microsurfacing. You can really custom make a fix for any particular instance that you're dealing with. Combining some of these thin treatments is going to enhance the performance, increase the safety, increase the serviceable life extension, increase the durability of a road. And what you might need is a section of road that's got distresses in it that maybe not one particular treatment will fix it, not one coat of microsurfacing, not one treatment with crack sealing, not one application of chip seals. You might need to double up with some of these treatments to really get the full effect of saving a pavement. And you can still do it, for far less money than your typical mill and fill. And, just depending on the treatment or your distress, again, consult with your contractor. Come up with a custom treatment that's going to address your problems. And, typically the thin treatment contractors can work with you, particularly the 4 contractors that Sean mentioned earlier. Reputable folks, got a good handle on pavement conditions. I would trust their evaluations. So it might be a pavement that's a little older, a little bit more distressed, but just don't throw the baby in the bathwater out. You know, you got a pavement that's aging a little bit, and all it's got is some surface cracking. Waterproof it with a crack sealing, and then come in with your slurry or your micro. You know, if you got a really oxidized and really cracked up pavement, you know, you've got a whole lot of crack sealing going on in that other picture that can be problematic for something else that you want to put on top of it. We talk about bonding problems. Perhaps a microsurfacing would have problem bonding with some of these crack sealing jobs that are just chasing cracks that are one foot square everywhere. So, you know, be reasonable expectations. Again, consult your contractors and come up with the right solutions. You know, we talked about being able to put microsurfacing down in more than one lift. This particular agency here it had a pavement in good shape, high volume arterial. They wanted a little thicker application. So they wanted to use the type 3 material on your first layer to correct any of the surface defects. The minor leveling was taken care of with the first coat of a coarser aggregate. But given that it was in an urban setting with high density, they wanted it to ride not quite so loud or rumble quite as loud as some of those type 3 aggregates will. And they wanted to put a smoother second coat down. So that was accomplished there, and just fit the bill all the way across the board for them. Cape seals, we've not talked about cape seals, but another combination treatment where you might have some surface cracking. You might have some surface defects that are beyond maybe even crack sealing and micro. You know, use your chip seal application as a mass crack filler. Use your chip seal application as a matte coat to create a template for your slurry or your microsurfacing to be adhered to. You know, it's a good treatment, and again, certainly budget friendly as compared to some of your other options. And you know, I get the argument all the time, well, I can't put tar and chip in a neighborhood with nice homes in it. Well, this golfing community up here in near Washington, D.C., they were adamantly hopeful that we would come in and do a treatment like this. So it was accepted very well. In fact, I had a lot of help from the neighborhood guys that were retired with traffic control. It was funny to watch some of these older guys knocking on doors and making sure people got their cars out of the street. So, but point is that surface distresses don't necessarily mean that you got to go the depth of milling and resurfacing everything. Some unique combinations. Picture on the left was actually a microsurfacing rut fill job that was done ahead of an asphalt overlay. It was in another swampy area in coastal Carolina that they knew they had pavement moving underneath, and they just wanted to level what was there as best they could. The hot mix asphalt guys couldn't level those ruts as effectively. They're scratching level with their steel wheel rollers were straddling the rut instead of getting compaction in the rut. So they depended on the micro to do it. And so we partnered with an asphalt producer to give them a road that was performing just the way that the department wanted. Top right corner was mill and pave in the middle, the mainline section of an interstate. And just to cost effectively maintain the shoulder, microsurfacing was used on the shoulder of the pavement. Specialty job up near Washington, D.C. again, on a concrete section of interstate. They wanted to delineate one of the commuter lanes just to make it stand out. You know, the certain parts during the day, you cannot use that lane. They've got the red X there, and then in rush hour times, they'll have a green arrow put in it. But they wanted to clearly delineate what was once a shoulder lane that can be used during peak times. But, you know, there's just so many options, so many capabilities and possibilities to use these treatments. But, you know, deal with your contractor, come up with the right application on the right road, use the right equipment with a well-trained crew, and you should come up with a successful solution to any of your problems, just about anyway. You know, not to say that we want to microsurface the world. We're not going to fix every ill that's out there. but there's plenty of combination treatments. There's plenty of options for preservation that aren't being explored. And I'll use this as just sort of wrapping up. This is a chart from a real-time agency customer that has embraced over time the value of pavement preservation. And this is a capital budget of $12 to $15 million a year for this one county. And you know how he distributes his money every year to take care of his infrastructure. You know, you can look at how much money he's spending, you know, to get reconstruction done. 16% of the budget, he only gets 6% of his roads done. Resurfacing, he's spending 60% roughly of his total budget, and he's only completing 30% of the targeted lane miles for that year. But when it comes to getting bang for his buck, he's spending 18% of his overall capital budget on thin treatments like chip seals and microsurfacings, with combining some crack sealing in there. And he's touching 58% of his targeted lane miles every year. So, you know, it just speaks volumes to the value that this particular agency, and really and across the board that we're dealing with, you know, invest a little bit of money and you can cover a lot of ground with it if you use it at the right time in the right place. We want to get away from that worst first thinking. Okay, pavement preservation is going to save roads, reduce your costs over time. It will help you by integrating pavement preservation thinking into your whole scheme. It's going to help you with your future budget planning. It's going to teach you how to timely and correctly use these treatments. But you know what I do preach to a lot of folks just trying to make this leap into preservation is that don't do it a one-time shot. You know, you'll look at something a year or two later and say, hey, that stuff worked pretty good. To get a really dramatic picture of it, dedicate, say, a 5-year plan to this. And it sounds like a big pill to swallow, but I've done it many times. If you dedicate a sustainable and dedicated funding stream for up to 5 years into your program, dedicate, you know, 15, 20% of those dollars to preservation. At the end of that 5 years, go back with your contractor and share with him the fact that you have bought back, you know, your backlog of maintenance. You've improved your pavement condition indexes, and you're staying on budget while you're doing it. So a one-time shot's not going to tell the whole story. Dedicate, you know, once you make your mind up and bite the bullet to go this direction, just do it. Do it and take a look at it 5 years later. You'd be really surprised. And just, you know, some other sources of information, you know, who says so besides us. You know, those of you that have not visited this roadresource.org website, take a second here, take a picture of this with your phone, or visit this website. It's a wonderful interactive website full of information. It'll help you prove to yourself that with what budget you have, there's places in there for you to input your costs that you have in every year, how many lane miles of road that you have, how much work you want to try to accomplish, and what your current strategies are. And it will graphically show you and self-populate how that you can manage your system for the budget that you've got established. And certainly the ISSA that Sean and I are both members of, their website, www.slurry.org. You got access to all sorts of product information, guideline specifications for those of you that want to get a program started. And we have got a thing going now where all agencies, trying to get that word out, board action, we have taken votes to allow all agencies, municipal, state, local agencies can join the International Slurry Surfacing Association at no cost. You'll have access to all the same information that Sean and I do on a regular basis, as well as getting feedback from industry. So that's a valuable thing. And if you just want to take this second, I think this might be the last slide. You know, take a picture of that QR code, and that'll take you right to the membership benefit page, I believe. And we'll just help you make your mind up. But again, for no investment and the availability of countless amounts of information, it's a great go-to. So with that, I just want to tell you thank you. And if anybody, I know we went a couple minutes long here, but if anybody has anything else that that they want to talk about, any questions that are out there, you know, I get to telling stories, and now I've got to hurry up at the end to finish things. So I hate if we felt rushed, but certainly, you know, feel free to bounce anything off of us. We would appreciate it. And I think Caitlin said this thing is being recorded. So if you want to go back and revisit anything that you've got to think of later, here's my contact information. I'm sure you can get a hold of Sean or the other members of the partnership and help you out at home. So we thank you for your time, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Are there any last minute questions here? If not, then I guess we will wrap up. So Chuck, can't thank you enough. Really appreciate you doing this. And just to reiterate, he said there at the very end, ISSA, roadresource.org, they're free, and they are worth, there's a ton of value in those things, tons of information. So, and they're no cost to you. So if you're even slightly interested in slurry or microsurfacing, I would strongly encourage you to check those things out. So if that's it, unless Caitlin, you got anything, we'll wrap it up and call it a day.
I don't have anything. Thank you so much, Chuck. I appreciate your time today.
Caitlin, Sean, I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. Anytime, anything I can do. Look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you, Chuck.
All right. Thank you. And thank you, everybody.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye now.